I don't know about you, but I'm glad that this is the last month, the last Sunday of February. Yeah, tomorrow we turn the corner in this COVID journey over the last 2 years with things easing off this week. And when I started attending this church 2 years ago, I used to be able to see your faces. Now I know what your eyes look like. That's about it. So, like you, we're looking forward to being able just to come out of this 2-year experiment that we've that we've been a part of, and I'm excited for what lies ahead. And I'm thankful that Pastor Olu, I know his full name is Olumide, but I'm lazy. He's Pastor Olu to me. I'm thankful that he's asked me to come and be a part of more of a regular teacher here at this congregation, and for me, you guys are my Africa fix. You know that, right? You know when I wake up several days during the week and I'm just longing to be in West Africa, and then I know, oh, Sunday's coming. I'm going to West Africa. So I'm delighted that my wife Karen is able to be here with me today, and my mom. I think you guys have seen her before. And today we have a very special guest. Our son Daniel is here. Yeah. He was supposed to be involved in a wedding of one of his best friends almost 18 months ago, but because of all the COVID push, it was finally this weekend. So we were at a wonderful wedding last night, and he flew in. He got up at 3 o'clock in the morning. He lives in Nova Scotia, so he lives very, very far away. And he flew in on Friday, which happened to be the 25th, which happened to be his 25th birthday. Yeah, so he accepts cash. Do you take Bitcoin? I'm not sure. Cryptocurrency. We can figure that out. But I've been talking to him about this church for so long, and I'm glad that he's able to be here. And he was actually with me on my first trip to Liberia in April of 2019, and so the African culture is something that he's been used to. So I'm delighted that my family could be here today. And this morning, we're really gonna. I think there's a timely message in my heart. I don't know if you've noticed, but people changed during COVID. Did you notice that? Did you see on your Facebook? Did you see on your Instagram? On your social media feeds that people changed? There was a shift in the way people started to talk to each other. You know, and a friend of mine said, we always knew that our friends were crazy, but we just didn't know about it. Until all this stuff started happening, and everybody has a voice to the world through social media, and there's been so much visceral, argumentative, divisive language that's been used over these past 2 years. And I'm ashamed to say that even in my own mind, I thought some things about people when I saw what they posted. And so many times, I had to just make sure that finger didn't hit that button to post a comment that was in my mind. And I said, Lord, what is the world seeing when they look at us as Christ followers? What are they seeing in our attitudes? What are they seeing in what we post and what our reactions are? And so this morning I've called the message, who do you say I am? And then we're going to flip that question. And we're going to say, who do people say Jesus is based solely on your actions? Especially our social media interactions. And when I say you, I'm not excluding myself. I'm part of the you. When I say that you have to do better, I'm talking about myself as well. The preacher should never exclude his or herself from the message. So you guys know me. I'm going to just skip through this stuff. But if you want to see what we're doing in Liberia and, some of the messages that I've been preaching, you can check us out on social media. Be kind on social media. Okay, you're going to hear that a lot today. Be kind. Really think before you post. Really think before you make that comment or you hit that like button. Thank God there's There's not an unlike button, because I don't know what that would be like. And real quick, I'll just mention, I can't believe that we're actually talking about traveling again. After 2 years and putting traveling out of our minds, I'm excited to announce that in May of 2023, a year from now, we're finally going back to Israel after these. It's going to be almost 3 years by that time that we've not been able to go. We've had to push our tour 5 times because of COVID, so we said, forget 22, let's just go next year. Now, has anybody here been to Israel? Let me see your hand. Has anybody been, besides my family? Okay, who has not been to Israel but would like to go to Israel one day? Okay, a few of you. Well, just kind of tuck away these dates in your heart, and maybe, who knows, maybe the Lord will tug, and you'll be able to join us on a tour to Israel. Today we're going to be talking about the Galilee. We're going to be talking about Caesarea, and they're not just names in the book, but when you actually get to go and stand in those places, this becomes alive. There's hardly a place in the Bible that I turn to that I haven't been to. But I have a memory associated with that place, whether it's the Sea of Galilee, whether it's Jerusalem, Nazareth, Bethlehem, Mount Carmel, the Valley of Armageddon, you name it, we've been there. And Israel is one of those places that when you go and you actually see the names that have been written in this book, it just brings it more to life. So I want you just to begin to think about that. And today's message is in the book I wrote called Understanding Jesus, and Karen will have it after the service if you feel like you just want to go a little bit deeper. But let's get into the message today. And the big question that Jesus asks his disciples, and we're going to talk about where he asked the question. Why did he ask it there? Why didn't he ask his disciples and his friends in the Sea of Galilee? Why didn't he ask in Nazareth? Why did he wait till he got this very specific place? I'm going to show you via photo today where Jesus was, what the disciples were seeing when he asked the question. And when you understand where he was and what was all around him, you'll understand why this was such a powerful question. Location matters in the Bible. Knowing what he was seeing, knowing what building was standing there, what government was ruling, what religious body was ruling, all of that matters when you're trying to understand a biblical passage. You know, we're 2,000 years removed from the culture of Jesus, right? Like even we have what, Nigerians here? How many Nigerians we have in the room? Most of you? A few? Right, from different parts of West Africa, the Caribbean. I've only been to South Africa and Liberia, but I've been to a few Caribbean destinations as well to go and preach. And although we're all the human race, we are very different people. And we say things that mean something in our culture, but they don't always mean the same thing in other cultures. And we're going to see that today, that the location matters where Jesus is. So let me just review real quick. We had it read to us before the service in Matthew chapter 16, verses 13 to 18. And I want you to look at names of places that maybe you never really paid attention to, but it matters. Because right before this, they're on the Sea of Galilee. The Bible says they had crossed the lake. That's the Sea of Galilee. Now, the Sea of Galilee is actually not a sea. It's a freshwater pond. It's a very small body of water, and that's where Israel gets over 75% of its drinking water. So right before this, they're in Galilee, and they could have gone anywhere for Jesus to ask the question. I'm going to show you a map in a few moments of what was around the area. But it says that when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, everybody say Caesarea Philippi. Now, how many of you know where Caesarea Philippi is? You know exactly where it is. Let me see your hands. No. So when the Bible says they were in the Galilee one day and the next morning they're in Caesarea Philippi, you don't understand the distance. Jesus takes his disciples and he goes really out of his way to get him to this place. And when he gets to Caesarea Philippi, this is where he asks the million-dollar question. Who do people say the Son of Man is? We're going to skip down to where it's highlighted. And he says, that's fine. I'm glad they think I'm this and but what about you? And he's asking you this morning. That's nice, whatever Pastor Joe thinks about who he is, but he's asking you this morning, who do you say that I am? What about you? Is he the God who provides for other people, or is he the God who provides for you too? Is he the God who calls other people, or is he the God who calls you too? I find it's easier to believe for somebody else than it is for myself sometimes. If you come to me and say, pray for me that this will happen, I will agree and believe that will happen. But when it's for me personally, I struggle and I say, yeah, but will he do it for me? And so he asks, who do you say I am? Before we dive deeper into this verse, let me show you a map of what Israel looked like at the time of Jesus. And in the lower part near the Dead Sea, if you look just to the left, you'll see there's Jerusalem, there's Bethlehem, there's Jericho, all these places that we know. And then you follow straight up the country. The Jordan River basically splits the area. The Syria-African rift, a big earthquake, shifted the plates and created this channel that the Jordan River flows away from the mountains of the north all the way down to the Dead Sea, which is the lowest point on the planet. That means every drop of water actually ends up in the Dead Sea. It makes its journey to the Holy Land. And if you look kind of 2/3 up the map, there's that little body of water. That's the Sea of Galilee. And if you look further to the top of the map, you'll see a place called Caesarea Philippi. Let me zoom in a little more. This is a Google map that I did a screenshot just the other day. And there you can see the Sea of Galilee. And there's an arrow pointing. I don't know if you see that arrow. At the top right, top left part of the lake, there's an arrow. And that's Capernaum. That's where Jesus is with his disciples. And then if you go straight up, you'll see another arrow. That's Caesarea Philippi. And so the one day they sail across the lake, and the next day they're way up in the north in Caesarea Philippi. That's a 10-hour walk on a good day. That's a 10-hour walk on the roads that are there today. But in the time of Jesus, when there was hills, and there was valleys, and there was dirt roads, it probably would have taken 15 to 20 hours to walk there. So why is it so important that Jesus takes the time out of his schedule and he walks his disciples way up to the north? That's what we're going to talk about. So Caesarea Philippi is a place of paganism. It's a place of Greek mythology. It's the place of where they worship all kinds of gods. And I'm going to show you what that place looks like in just a few minutes, but I want to give you the background here. If Jerusalem is the head office for Judaism, where you worship the one true God, Caesarea Philippi is the exact opposite. That's where you go when you want to learn about every god known to man and you want to worship that God. This is where you go. And every time in that culture somebody did a miracle, they thought that person was a god. They would make a statue and they would put it in Caesarea Philippi. So if we were in Israel and we raised somebody from the dead, they would say, oh, he's a god. There's no way a man could do that. And so they would make a statue of me and they would put it where I'm going to show you here in just a few moments. Now we know of a man named Paul. And Paul and Barnabas were in a region where they had just healed a man. And the text says that when the crowd saw what Paul had done, that he had healed this man, What did they shout in their language? They said, look, the gods have come down to us in human form. So they thought that Paul and Barnabas were gods because they did something that he couldn't explain. And if you go down to the end, it says that they were getting ready to make a sacrifice to Paul and Barnabas because they had done a miracle. So imagine, Paul does one miracle and they want to make a sacrifice to him because they think he's a god. What did they think of Jesus, who had walked on the water, who had calmed the storms, who had raised several people from the dead, who had multiplied bread and fed thousands of people, who cast out demons? I wonder what they thought about him. And that's why when he gets to Caesarea, he says, who do they say I am? Which God are they trying to associate me with? You understand? Because in Caesarea, there were statues to men who they said were gods that were all over the place. And so Jesus says, in the midst of all of this, I know what they're saying, but what are you saying about me? So let me show you a little bit of Caesarea. You look, you can see there's a large opening. You guys see that right on the bottom left? And then there's a few other niches that are in the wall. I'm going to zoom in on a couple of these for you to see. They're beautiful. These are all hand carved. They were done thousands of years ago. But what's interesting is, if you look at it, this is like an ancient door frame. These are doorways, or these are gates. I'll show you one more here. Again, very beautifully made. And this mountain here is known as a place called Mount Hermon, or Mount Hermon. And it's an imposing mountain, and to that people in that time, they thought everything ended there. And beyond this mountain, that's where Hades was. That's where the dead would go. That's where their spirits would go. And so those niches that you saw on the wall, those were the gates of Hades. Now come on, you guys remember me. What do you say when you learn something new when Pastor Joe's teaching? Come on. I thought COVID messed with your brains. Come on. You see, Jesus makes the statement, the gates of Hades or the gates of hell shall not prevail. And the church goes, yes! We don't even know what the gates of Hades are. What are you saying amen to? We don't even understand that it was a physical, literal place where millions of pilgrims would go to worship false gods. And they believed that when you got to the gates of Hades, when you would make your sacrifice, that the spirits could come and commune with you and you could go to them. It was a very dark and ungodly place. Now, in those little niches, let's go back. Imagine in every one of these, and I was only able to take a picture of the one side, every one of these had a statue that was dedicated to some god. And so I want you to imagine that Jesus is standing at this place, surrounded by idols, surrounded by statues made to other gods. And they're saying, oh, look, that's Hermes. Oh, look, that's Zeus. Oh, look, that's... And Jesus says, in the light of all this, who do you say that I am? You see why the question is so big here compared to other places? Now, these are the ruins of the city of Caesarea Philippi as they are today, but let me show you an artist rendition, and I want you to remember that cave to the lower left side, and I want you to remember that other smaller niche, and here's an artist rendition. You guys see that there? It's a little hard to see, but there's a temple there in the lower left side of the screen where the big cave opening is today. That was a temple built to a Greek god named Pan. I'm going to show you Pan in just a few moments. And you can see all the little niches in the wall. They all have little statues in them. Here's another artist rendition of what Caesarea Philippi looked like in those days. Beautiful. Greco-Roman city. Tall white columns with tiled red roofs. I mean, absolutely stunning in that day. But where it says the Grotto of Pan, where the temple was, people would bring sacrifices there and they would throw them into the cave. And when the animal was dashed upon the rocks and the blood would flow, they believed the gates of Hades had opened up. So now you could speak to your ancestors and they could speak to you. Now, how many people have even heard of the Greek god Pan? Let me see your hand if you've heard Pan. Not my mom, you've heard me teach this before. Anybody? There was a whole city set up to worship him. Now here are some artists' renditions. He's always associated with goats. He was said to be half human and half goat. And every drawing you ever see of him, he's always holding a flute in his hand. And that flute is known as the pan flute. Have you ever heard that before? A pan flute? It was said that he would run through the forest and he would play that instrument, and it was such a terrible, shrieking sound that people would run away from it, and that's where we get the word panic. Yeah, panique. We run from that which makes us afraid. And this is who this city is dedicated to. And Jesus says, "Who am I? Who am I? I know what these people here think. Who am I?" And Peter, out of all the disciples, he's the one who has the guts to say it out loud. We give Peter a hard time, you know that? As theologians, as Bible teachers, we give Peter a hard time. We say, oh, Peter was just a rough fisherman from the Galilee. He was like a redneck in his day. And we make fun of Peter. He was rough. He wasn't educated. He was just a guy who worked with his hands. He's the guy who started to drown. Remember when he got out of the boat? He started to drown. Remember him? But you know what? He got out of the boat. And Peter's always getting himself in trouble with Jesus. To the point where Jesus says, "Get thee behind me, Satan." Yikes. You read the Bible and it says, "And then Peter said unto them," but nobody actually asked Peter a question. Peter is always opening up his mouth, inserting his foot. He's always getting himself in trouble. But he's always the first to speak. He was the first to deny Jesus too. So that impulse to react, you have to watch that impulse. I think of myself like a Peter sometimes. My body reacts faster than my brain. Sometimes you have to go, hang on a second. But Peter reacts here. When Jesus says, "Who do you say I am?" and everybody's quiet. Nobody wants to give the wrong answer. Even here, when I ask you questions, nobody raises their hands. You're afraid of giving the wrong answer, right? But Peter says, "I know who you are." He says, "I've been with you long enough. I've seen what you do." And look at Peter's answer and remember where they are in Caesarea Philippi. Remember all the false gods, all the statues? Remember that. When Jesus says, "What about you? Who do you say I am?" And Simon Peter answers, "You are the Christ. You are the Messiah. You are the anointed one. You are the Son of what kind of God? You're the Son of the living God. All these other gods are dead. understanding where he was, he said, all these gods are dead, but I know who you are, Jesus. You are the Son of the living God. We don't have to bring sacrifices to this temple. You are the great sacrifice. And so Peter, a human man, says to another human man at that time, to say, you're the Son of the living God, that was blasphemy in Judaism. You could be put to death for claiming that a man was divine, but he says, I know who you are. You're the Son of the living God. And the Bible doesn't say this, but I could tell you, Jesus was shocked. He says, Peter? Matthew, you're a tax collector. You're an accountant, high-ranking official working for the Romans. You didn't get it? Mark, he could have gone through all the disciples who were more intelligent and more qualified. It doesn't say it, but Jesus was saying, Peter, really? And you can see this. Watch what he says. He says, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man. That's a nice way of saying, I didn't think you were going to figure it out on your own. He goes, Peter? No, he couldn't get to this on his own. He says, this was not revealed to you by man. You didn't figure this out on your own, but it was revealed to you by my Father in heaven. Knowing who he is a revelation that comes from heaven. Because how many people do you know, they can look at the life of Jesus and say, he was just a good man. He was just a good teacher. He was just a nice person. It takes a revelation from God to realize that he's more than a man. He is the Son of the living God. And then he says, I tell you that you're Peter. He changes his name from Simon, Shimon, to Petra, Petros, or English, Peter, which means rock. And when he says that I will build my church, he says, on this rock. Was he talking about a rock that was on the ground? See, you don't know where Caesarea Philippi is. You don't realize that Mount Hermon behind is the biggest rock in that part of the world. It's a giant rock is what this mountain is. And he says, Peter, I'm going to make you a rock, and on this rock, on this very mountain, I'm going to build something that you're going to call the church one day. And these, the gates of Hades. What's the gate of Hades? The idea of multiple gods. The idea of you having to make the sacrifice, all of that. He says the gates of Hades, the worship of multiple gods, is not going to overcome or prevail the movement that I'm about to start with you, Peter, and the rest of you. And oh, we love to pray that in church. The gates of hell will not prevail against the church. And we have no blessed clue. Now you've noticed I'm not a very exciting preacher. I don't jump up. I don't really yell that much. Because I'm not here to entertain you, here or anybody watching this anywhere. I'm not here to entertain you. You'll be greatly disappointed if you came for that. But my heart and why I do what I do is so that you'll have a deeper understanding of what this book really means. Because this is the syllabus for our lives. This is how we say that we live our lives, and most of the time we don't even understand the depth of what it's trying to say to us. And you know what's beautiful? Jesus makes this prophecy. He says that the gates of Hades, this religion, this movement, it's not going to prevail. It won't be able to stand against the church. And within 300 years, the Roman Empire converted to Christianity, and the first thing they did was they tore down all the temples to the false gods, and they built a church on that very mountain. When he said that the gates of Hades would not prevail, he literally meant it. And the gates of Hades are still not prevailing today. But we have to choose. We have to answer the question, who do you say I am? And this is where I want to close. And I apologize for going a few minutes over. Let me ask you a question. If I said to you, I have really bad news for you, you have 24 hours to live, what would your response be to that? Where would your mind go? What things would you want to tie off? What things would you want to get in order, right? If I said you have 24 hours, we're going to bring in all your close friends and family. I want you to think about what would you say to those people if you knew all you had was 24 hours to live. What would you say to them? Would you ask them about the Toronto Raptors game? Would you ask if your Amazon order arrived? If you knew this was the last time on earth that you were going to be together with these people in this room, what would you say to them? I don't know what you would say, but I'm pretty sure it would be something that's important. Something that would be legacy that you would want to pass on to them so they could carry on, right? For the sake of time, let me go to the last verse here. This is in the upper room. This is at the Last Supper. From here, he's going to go to the Garden of Gethsemane. He's going to be betrayed, and then he's going to be crucified. This is the last time that he's gathered with his disciples, his close friends. And you can see there that in the biblical sense, in the Hebrew sense of a disciple is to be a living copy of the master. That scares me. So when I say I'm a disciple, a follower of Jesus, biblically I'm saying I'm choosing to be an exact replica, a copy of my master, who is Jesus. That's why when they came to the disciples and they couldn't cast out the demon, do you remember that? Jesus came and he said, "How long have I been with you? If you can't cast it out, that reflects poorly on me." Our actions reflect on who he is. It reflects on how people see who he is. And here he is. He had just finished washing their feet, which was the dirtiest, filthiest part of the body in the first century. You walked around barefoot, stepping in camels, you know what, and dirt and dust. And he gets down on his hands and knees and he washes their feet. And after he dries that off, he says, "Listen, you don't know this. This is all going on." He says, "But this is the last time we're all going to be together. So I want to say something to you." And he says, "In fact, I have a new commandment. Do all those other things that I told you to do. But this is the big one. This is the final thing, the final commandment that I leave with you." And he says, "Love one another." 3 simple words, but really hard to read when you look at some people's Facebook posts. In that meeting, when so-and-so says that thing, here's the 3 words: love one another. But then he says, "As I have loved you, so you must love one another." Think of how much he loves you. Think of how far he was willing to go. He said, "You need to love in the same way that I love." And that way people will know. And look what he says. "And by this, if you love people, not just because they do good stuff for you, not because they're good looking, not because they have money, not because they're popular." He says, no. "If you love them the way I love you, then people will know that you are my disciples." So here's the question as we end the teaching this morning. When people look at our lives, who do they say Jesus is? Is he angry? Judgmental? Waiting to stick it to you because of what you said? Who do people say he is? Based on the way we love one another. Friends, let us be a church. Let us be a people that when others would look at my life, when they look at your life, they would say, I don't know what's different about him, but something's different. Any other person would have yelled. Any other person wouldn't have helped, but they just keep helping, even though he knows they're talking garbage about him, but he still does it anyways. When you love like Jesus loved, people know you're somebody's disciple. Let's live, brothers, sisters, let's live in a way that when people look at us, they say, Jesus the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Amen? Amen. Let's